everyone, so just wanted to get another quick video out for multiple unit anterior case design. This is 5 through 12. And thus far, I've only marked the margins and I'm working on the path of insertion, and I got about here when I decided to start recording this. I'm gonna explain my process, go through some of my techniques, and try and contribute as much as I can in the video. If you guys have any questions after watching this, feel free to comment, whether this be on Facebook, YouTube, or CEREC Doctors. Just feel free to engage and offer any feedback. But as for now, we're just setting the path of insertion. I've marked all of these as crowns. Some of them are prep more as a veneer, some of them as 3/4 crowns, but you tend to get the best fit when you just call it a crown. And I'll fast forward through some of the more mundane things, and if there's anything I want to kind of touch up on or go more in depth with, I'll slow the video down and kind of walk you guys through what I'm doing. So enjoy. All right, and as soon as we get here, restoration parameters, I'm going to go over some of the parameters that I typically use for any case, and then some of the parameters that I won't touch or will adjust for this type of particular case. So for most of my cases, including veneers, especially veneers, I'll take the spacer up to about anywhere from 100 to 130 is good, but 110 is a happy medium. And I like that. For anterior cases, I'll leave proximal contacts, occlusal contacts, and dynamic contacts strength alone. If this were a posterior case, I would then adjust occlusal and dynamic contacts. But as for proximal contacts, I usually leave that at about 25. And you could see at 25, you've got a little bit of green, and typically that's just the right amount of pressure interproximally to allow the crowns to seat, but contacts aren't too light. That's kind of why it's labeled as green. Green, you're good to go. So we'll leave that at 25. As for occlusal contacts, you can see the lighter you get or the more that goes away here, you're going to have less contact. And for most of my cases with the occlusion, I'll try and leave things slightly out of contact. But for this one, we'll just leave it at 25. For posteriors, it just depends on the material, but if this, for this particular case, I'm going to set the minimal radial thickness to 500 microns for both of them, so about 0.5 millimeter. And this will allow the design to stay, or to go no thinner than 0.5 millimeter. If any of this light blue shows through the design, call it the minimal thickness bubble, then that means you've passed 0.5 millimeters in thickness, or you've gone below 0.5 millimeters in thickness. For marginal thickness, this also depends on the material and how it's milled or how it's fabricated. For this, we're using diamond burrs to grind the material, and this is a pretty forgiving material. It's the Trilux Forte, but we'll make the marginal thickness about 80. If this were zirconia and we were dry milling it, I would say leave it at about 150. The width of the ramp, that's fine. Angle, that's fine. We'll check, remove undercuts, and also consider instrument geometry. And then last but not least, we'll apply this to all the restoration so we don't have to go through each crown individually and make those parameter adjustments. So we're going to click OK. And then adjust morphology. I typically leave this alone because I like the biogeneric variation option. And the biogeneric variation is a tool that you can then use once you get into the edit element phase. But if you disable biogeneric and go with, say, tooth database or anterior forms, it kind of disables that tool. It doesn't allow you to use it. So because I like to use it, I'll leave biogeneric variation checked. So we'll go right into positioning. All right, so these look positioned decent. Just things you'll notice right off the bat, these ratios or proportions between 7 and 10. The laterals look a little bit too wide. Centrals could be wider, these could be more narrow. So we'll get to all that, but let's pull up the lower jaw first. And this actually looks really good. Let's look at things from the occlusal. That looks good as well. It's just going to be minor adjustments, and I'll kind of fast forward through this. If you guys have any questions, or if I want to go more in depth with anything, I'll slow it down. But if you do have any questions regarding this process, feel free to leave any comments, and I'll do my best to get to it. And what we're doing here is we're trying to line up this proposal of a crown, or this tooth shape. We're trying to line it up as best we can to the natural tooth. We're trying to line it as best as we can with the occlusion, and also with the prep, the margins. You could see that there's some slight exposure of this margin, so what we'll do is we'll go to the scale tool and we'll slide that over, and that's going to give us some predictable proposals. The more you have this lined up with the prep itself, the better it's going to be once you go into the edit element phase. And the margin that I primarily focus on is this margin right here up by the gingival, the facial margin or buccal margin. I like to get this proposal lined up with that pretty, as close as we can. And that won't morph the shape of the proposal if you do get it good there. If it's too extended forward or too extended back, you're going to have the proposal look ideal down here, but then it's also going to have to adjust to fit this margin once you get into that element. So you could have it either too bulky or somewhat concave. So just try and get this facial margin lined up with the proposal when you're positioning these teeth. Scale this a little bit this way, a little bit that way. And I don't worry too much about the lingual. That can be off, and the computer will adjust all that. Then you can see this incisal edge isn't lined up, so we'll rotate this slightly, bring it back. Line things up there. Looks good. Like I said, we needed to widen those centrals to make for better proportions. You can see just as we naturally scale the tooth to fit the prep, kind of takes care of that for us. And once we get the proportions right, all we pretty much need to worry about is symmetry. Pulling up the grid to get our length all lined up. We're also looking at the symmetry of the contour lines to make sure that those are mirroring each other. Scale this out. Beautiful. Go. Let's double check everything. Looks good. Let's move into the edit element phase. All right, not bad. First things first, let's save it so we don't lose any of the work we've already done. If the software just so happens to crash. Okay. Now that we're here, first things first, this is my process. You guys can choose to use this process or not, but this is what's giving me the best results. I always start out with the laterals. Start with the laterals and go over to tools. Let's go to broad variation. This was the tool that I mentioned earlier that will allow us to adjust the morphology to, what we desire. And, to find the right morphology, I like to look at the dentition of the other teeth. You can see that these are worn. We can wear down the incisal manually. We don't have to necessarily find that with the broad variation options. But we're also looking at the line angles, how smooth the anatomy is, or how dramatic it is, and kind of just want to use it as a reference to determine what kind of morphology we want. All right. And we're also looking at the gender. This is a male, so we want to take that into consideration as well. You can see all the options as I run through this. Stop about right. Stop about right there. After we do that, I'm going to go over to move, and then we're going to single out the tooth, and we're going to reposition it because it can adjust its position after using the biogenic variation tool. Beautiful, and we're actually going to leave it a little bit long because I don't know if you remember, but there were some wear marks on the incisal. So we're going to leave it a little bit long and manually wear these down. So we're going to go to the remove tool. We're going to increase the strength to about 50. And then we're going to start making natural wear marks along the incisal. And forgive me if I don't get this right the first time. It takes a little bit of trial and error to find exactly where you want it. And then we'll smooth it out. And if it doesn't work out the way you want it, just go back to biogenic variation and recalculate your proposal. No harm done. Go to shape, or directional, 2-directional. Then to finish it off, we're gonna go to the smooth tool, decrease the strength all the way, and kind of just go around the margins, go around the top of the contour lines. Remove the upper jaw, and again the interproximal area, make the emergence nice and natural. You want it to look like a lateral even if the upper jaw isn't in place. Back to the form tool. Okay. And we're going to do that all the way around the case. So stay tuned, and I'm going to fast forward through this.